On today's episode of the Cryptoverse, it looks like Ethereum is going to fork. Again. TunnelBear is the simple VPN app that makes it easy to browse the web privately and enjoy a more open and secure internet experience. Try TunnelBear for free by checking out the link in the video description below. Hi there guys, and welcome to the latest episode of the Cryptoverse, your regular dose of news and commentary on Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, and blockchains. I am your host, Chris Coney, so let's get into today's news. So today's article comes from CoinDesk, coindesk.com. I had to take a double take when I saw this headline because I could barely believe it. It says on CoinDesk this is a featured article, and I'm not surprised. So the article's headline says, "So, it looks like Ethereum is going to have to fork again." So let's see what this has got to say for itself. It starts out by saying, "Deja vu?" Although there isn't a timeline yet, Ethereum creator Vitalik Buterin today suggested that the platform's developers may have to hard fork to once again solve pressing problems on the network. If pursued, the problem could come less than 3 months after Ethereum last executed a hard fork in a controversial bid to return funds to investors in the DAO. So that was my first reaction when I read this. I was like, I can't believe I'm hearing this, honestly. And you can see why I've highlighted most of this first bit in the article. So the bit in orange here, it says, despite the potential risks, in brackets, last time the upgrade didn't go quite as planned, the new fork seems to have initial support, as it's seen as a way to foil ongoing attacks on the network. So for those of you that don't know, when it says the last hard fork didn't exactly go to plan, what that means is it actually resulted in 2 versions of the Ethereum network, both of which continue to this day. So I'll call that an unintended consequence, and even that would be an understatement. So the yellow bit here that I've highlighted, it says, in recent weeks, the Ethereum blockchain has been barraged with a series of denial of service attacks which have slowed transactions and caused nodes to crash. And exchanges like Kraken and Shapeshift have temporarily paused Ether trades as a result. Again, a denial of service attack is where you don't actually have to break into a system in order to take it down, right? You just simply overload it somehow. Now in Ethereum's case, the attackers are running certain code that's perfectly acceptable on the Ethereum network. The trouble is that it's crashing the software on many of the Ethereum nodes, right? And what's a really bad sign to me is when Kraken and Shapeshift have to actually remove Ethereum until the problem gets fixed. Of course, these guys can afford to do that because Ethereum is just one of the many networks that they deal with. Now the next bit in green says, because of this, developers are looking for a fast fix to the problem. Ding, ding, ding. Now I don't know the author, I don't know if those are the author's words, but when I read words like fast fix, that says a lot. So it's fixing the problem quickly that's most important than anything else. Is that what I'm hearing here? More important than a fix that is, say, effective, or a fix that is, say, long-lasting? But okay, maybe I'm being too picky. I could let that one slide. However, reading on to the bit in blue here, it says ETH core developer Mark Tokowitz, who works on the Parity client, noted that a fork increasingly seems the easiest option to stop the attacks. There we have it again. Seems like the easiest option. Not the most secure option, not the lowest risk option, not the best option for user safety, the easiest option. And I always pay attention to people's words because they betray our deepest thoughts. And I say that is because we don't select the specific words that we're going to use consciously. We just have an intention of the meaning we want to convey, and something in the brain sort of constructs these sentences. So we don't think through the exact sentence structure of what we're going to say. I'm not thinking about this right now. I'm just having the intention about what I want to say, and somehow these coherent sentences are flying out of my mouth. But there's an algorithm in my mind somewhere that is constructing them in a particular way, which is how come if you hear Chris Coney said something, you'd be like, well, that doesn't sound like him, right? Do you know what I mean? Like, you'd know that the way I put sentences together, and again, I'm doing it consciously, right? It just comes out. But if you heard someone try and pass a piece of text off as me having said it, you'd be like, there's something wrong with that, you know? It doesn't seem like that is constructed from Chris's brain, right? And that's those deeper thoughts I'm talking about. The deepest thoughts, values, and beliefs. That's all underground. That's my operating system that determines the types of words that I use and the way I put it across. And that's why I'm saying that when you hear things like, we're looking for a fast fix, this looks like the easiest option, that's at the forefront of their minds. And to me, that's a big red flag. So moving on, the purple bit here that I've highlighted says, in the last month, developers of the Go version Ethereum client, shorthand is Geth, have released 6 new versions to fix the various denial of service attacks to no avail. But rather than continue to create new releases, the team has averaged 1 release every 3 days, the idea behind the hard fork is to resolve the network issues in one fell swoop. Now look, I'm not having a go at these guys because, not because I think I'm a superior developer, because I'm not, right? My job is to interpret situations for you, my viewer, and give you my philosophical, moral, and ethical interpretation. You can choose to do what you want with it then, right? What I do know, though, is that there are superior developers out there who would not have had to make 6 attempts to fix this and still be failing at it. Now, I don't expect perfection either. I don't expect them to fix it on the first attempt, but the limit for me would be 3. Right? If you want a specific number, it would be 3. Now, what I mean is that this run of 6 attempts tells me the scope of their understanding of their own system is severely limited. Either that, or they've created a system that just has a level of complexity that they cannot ever hope to understand. So 6 times, they were confident that they had solved the problem, and then they discovered, oh dear, there was something else we didn't consider. There was something else beyond our awareness. And that could be because A, they lack the competence, or it could just be B, the level of complexity they are dealing with is beyond comprehension. And therefore, they can't be blamed for not understanding it, but they can be blamed for initiating such a complex project in the first place. So this continual cycle of finding other things that they hadn't considered before the last software update, this is often a sign of like a lack of experience or a lack of understanding or a lack of knowledge. And look, if you lack the knowledge, understanding, and experience, that's all right with me, right? What's not all right with me is pretending otherwise. And the reason I can speak with authority on this is that this is exactly what I did myself for most of my 20s, from probably age 22 to age 29, maybe 30. So my actual ability to deliver results back then was way behind what my mouth was able to say I could do, right? So I talked a lot of talk, but my ability to actually back up those words was way behind, right? And deep down, I knew it, but I just couldn't help myself. I wanted to come across well. I wanted to prove myself, and I wanted people to accept me. I mean, it was in business, right? I wanted people to buy from me, so I'd just tell them whatever it is that I had to tell them, right? And then figure it out later, even if it meant toiling in massive amounts of anxiety. So these days, I make sure that the other person knows my level of competence and the risks that are involved. And then if they accept those risks, then we're good to go, right? That way, if something goes wrong, then we share accountability. There's no blame because we both knew exactly what we're getting ourselves into, right? If I already have half of the solution that they want, but I think I'm going to have to create the other half of the solution, then I'll tell them. And if they go, that's cool, go for it. And if they know there's actually no guarantee whether I'll be able to create that other half or not, we're both accepting all the risks, but it's all agreed up front and everyone is fully informed. But I'm also wise enough to know that if the level of complexity of the problem in front of me is beyond my capacity, then I'll go, look, this is just beyond me. I'm out of my depth. We need to either bring someone else in, or you need to give it to someone else, more experience, more knowledge, etc. Until such time as I have developed that additional knowledge, awareness, and experience, then I will take on these kinds of projects. But it just seems like this desperate need to get ahead of ourselves, and I don't know what that's about. That's just part of our nature, I guess. I do have a sense that it was what I was suffering from was a feeling of inadequacy and having to make up for it by saying I could do more than I could actually do. Anyway, back down from the philosophical pedestal, let's move back to the article here. So it says, this bit I've highlighted in grey says, not to mention hard forks are arguably part of Ethereum's DNA, as many in its community view the action as a way to upgrade the software in a way that supports its larger goals. And there's a quote, the Ethereum project always stated that it will hard fork often to progress the technology. And that's a developer working on the Ethereum's Raiden network. If this is true, then it's exactly what I was just talking about. If it's part of Ethereum's core philosophy to hard fork often, and everyone is aware of that, then I'm good, right? However, I don't think everyone is aware of this fact. I mean, that was news to me. I'm not an Ethereum expert, but you shouldn't have to be an Ethereum expert, right? If it requires you to be an expert in the thing in order to understand it, to me that's a problem, because that hinders adoption. And I don't just mean user adoption, I mean adoption in terms of developers getting a hold of it. So the final bit I've highlighted here in red is quite a big bit, but this is a good one. Under the heading of why a hard fork, it says, the attacker has been taking advantage of the way that the network prices a function called gas, which determines the fees used for accessing smart contract processing power on Ethereum. Because prices are low, those familiar with the matter said the attacker can cheaply disrupt the network. This is what the developers are trying to fix. So while there are many versions of the hard fork in progress, the gist is the same. The fork will seek to raise gas prices to a cost that more accurately incentivizes actions that aren't disruptive to the network. And then in brackets it says, some multiply the cost by 20 or 10 to 20 times what it was before. And it says, for example, the top version of the hard fork, EIP 150, addresses this. I suppose that's Ethereum Improvement Protocol 150. So in the social media posts describing the proposed changes, Buterin explained that developers ultimately hope to adopt a more dynamic a gas fee market that can meet the changing demands of the network. But right now it's too complicated to roll out, and the team wants to push out a quick fix as soon as possible to stop network disruptions. Now, I remember reading an opinion piece a while back about this kind of thing. I can't remember exactly who wrote it, but they were talking about this fixed gas price that's built into the Ethereum protocol. And it's a constant, right? A constant like this is a solid footing that you can use to build something on, right? You always build your house on the rock. Don't build it on the sand because it's not firm foundations. It'll just slide into the sea. So say an app is created, builds its entire economic model on the basis of each transaction costing a specific amount of gas. So the app is running on Ethereum, and every time it uses some Ethereum processing power, it's being charged this fixed amount of gas. And say that is core to the app's business model. It's relying on that fixed amount of gas price for its whole business model to be profitable. So if this changes to a variable amount, like the cost is variable, or say it goes up by 10 or 20 times, it might not only put certain types of apps that exist now out of business, but it might also make a whole category of apps that need those tiny transaction fees. It might make that whole category give up on Ethereum as a viable platform entirely. So if you haven't seen my video from a few days ago called Why I'm Long Bitcoin and Short Ethereum, I strongly encourage you to go back and view it. In that video, I talk about the value of specialization. Now, having read this article, I'm increasingly getting the impression that Ethereum is trying to do too much and just be too much of a general solution. And that's at the root of all these different problems that keep cropping up. And look, ultimately, it comes down to the user's perception. And the average user doesn't know enough about the technology to make an analysis at that level. So we'll have to go with an analysis that everyone can do, no matter what their level of sophistication. So if the average user looks at Ethereum and sees a lot of changes, then it gives them a sense of uncertainty. And since most people are risk averse, and since the average user doesn't have enough technical knowledge to really know what's going on, the most logical conclusion is to just write it off as too complicated and stay away. So thanks for watching, guys. If you liked this video, like it. If you disliked it, dislike it. Leave me a comment below for some feedback and get subscribed. Or even consider supporting me directly by going to cryptoversity.com/podcast and sending me a Bitcoin tip to the address on that page. If you would like to support me without actually spending any money, then click on the Steam It logo on the podcast page and then click the vote button on the Steam network. That will get me some cryptocurrency without you actually having to spend a penny. If you like something physical in exchange for your donation, then head over to the Cryptoversity store, where you can buy yourself a t-shirt with the Cryptoversity branding on it. That kind of thing helps me out a lot. Or if you would like more structured information on Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies and blockchains, head over to the courses section and buy yourself an online course. That's all for today, so I'll be back on Monday with the next episode of the Cryptoverse. So until then, it's me, Chris Coney, saying bye for now.